Today, we are in conversation with one of the world's renowned gastroenterologists from Kansas City, who is also the member of University of Kansas Center's Cancer Prevention and Control Research Program, Dr. Prateek Sharma. Dr. Sharma, welcome to the session. Probiotics are known to be nature's happy or good bacteria that is becoming a constant companion to our everyday nutritional requirements. While earlier just having a balanced meal helped, now people are being more and more cautious about including probiotics in their regular dietary regimen. To know more about the health benefits of probiotics, we have with us Dr. Sharma. Dr. Sharma, welcome to the session on probiotics and also on gluten intolerance that most people in India are suffering from. Probiotics are being sold in the market as a panacea for most issues related to our digestive health. In fact, for children, we used to actually, earlier times, it was just curd that was given, and that was considered to be, the ultimate thing. And now, there are so many probiotic forms of liquids that are actually available in the market. So do they really help, and are they really necessary? And how frequently should they be actually given?
If something promises too much, it's actually not good for you, or to be taking it. So if you have, as we talked about the concoction, or now we're talking about probiotics, if there's a list of, 10 advantages, so it says, take this, and again, this is not specific about probiotics, but things in general. If it says, take this, it's going to boost your immune system, you will lose weight on it if you're obese, you'll start, having a very good sleep, your energy level will go through the roof, things like that. It's probably not true. So always be very careful about these things. So now let's just get into the probiotic and just understand a little bit about where we are coming from. The main job of the probiotics, which contain so-called the good bacteria, is to maintain this healthy balance. So, our gut is lined with microbiomes or with bacteria, which we need to function. So, those are the natural bacteria which our gut have and should have, because that allows us to function. And this balancing act is happening in our bodies all the time. Therefore, not everybody needs to take probiotic supplements to make it happen, because our gut naturally has these good bacteria and they're a part of our body. Eating, if you're not sick, you're not having any issues, eating a well-balanced diet, which is rich in fiber, you mentioned yogurt, or curd, healthy fruits, things like that. If you do that, that is enough and sufficient for having these good bacteria, line your system, and they will keep you happy. So if you're fine and healthy, not having any medical problems, not doing it, then just stick with a natural balanced diet and you'll be good.
Also, doctor, about children with autism, they're commonly affected with GI problems. So are there any specific probiotics that will actually benefit children with the autism spectrum?
So again, good point. So gastrointestinal symptoms or gastro symptoms have been repeatedly, reported in patients with autism, as you mentioned, and autism also goes through a spectrum. So we call it usually the autism spectrum, and there have been some correlation between the behavior abnormalities and gastrointestinal symptoms. And there is growing evidence in the literature that the gut microbiome, or this gut bacteria, as we were talking about, is related to these shifts which have been, described in that. And so we call this the brain, sort of gut-brain axis. And there's a lot of research being done, in this thing. So a small trial may be helpful, but again, the definite research has not been done with controlled trials. There have been smaller studies which show some, benefit. And what exactly, remember in this probiotics also, what type of strains of bacteria do you need in those probiotics? What's their duration? Still need to be performed in this situation. So initial studies show promise. So maybe for a few, initial trial of probiotics may be helpful, but not in the long run as yet.
Doc, in fact, talking about IBS, and also something that is actually growing in India is awareness about gluten intolerance. Earlier, nobody talked about it, but now people are aware of how much gluten they are taking, and they're actually looking into the ingredients, which was not there previously. So, could you tell us about, how overconsumption of processed foods, and also a little about gluten intolerance and how it affects, how the relation between that and the processed foods.
Right. So, good point again about, gluten, which again is, quite a common ingredient, which is used in all foods, and specifically also in, the preparation of Indian meals. Roti, I mean, and any naan, things like that you eat, they are all made from, have gluten in there. The estimated population prevalence is more clear in the Western world than it is, in India, for example. And in the Western world now, the estimates are that 1% of the population is diagnosed with celiac disease, which is the disease that you get from gluten, intolerance. And it's not that it's a disease of just the West. That's where we have most data. For example, in Africa now, they're thinking that the prevalence of the celiac disease may be as high as around, 5%. In India, unfortunately, the exact prevalence, is not known, but it did correlate very well with wheat intake, rather than on genetics and things like that. There's some studies to, show that. And again, as you know, wheat is gluten. And so, we do know that in India that it may be related to that. Now, you talked about processed food, which is different, because celiac disease is mainly from intolerance to gluten. So we have to separate this out a little bit and not get confused about all of these. If you look at gluten-free, what are the main things that you need to be concerned about? Wheat, rye, barley. So always be careful, look at the labels, which are there. And also remember, when you talk about processed food, is that gluten is also added to some of the processed food, so canned food. So a lot of people now people are busy with their life and jobs and things. They don't want to cook. They will, buy stuff from either in cans or in, boxed items. And always read that, because some of the grains, such as oats, may be cross-contaminated, which it shouldn't have any gluten in there, depending as to how they were processed. So you're absolutely right that it's not the processed food itself which is causing it, but the processed food may have some gluten component in there.
That's very interesting, Doc. Also, how careful should parents be? Because, nowadays with children during COVID times, there's a lot of, again, because they cannot go out, there's a lot of access to, ready to eat meals and processed foods. So how careful should parents be when it comes to children and intolerance towards such foods?
Yeah, so I think obviously very careful, right? And it doesn't mean that everyone has, gluten intolerance or celiac disease. As I mentioned, that in the US, it's 1%, which means that out of 100 people, 99 will not have, celiac disease there. So one of the things also is that it's very important to differentiate gluten disease or celiac disease from just a fad, right? It shouldn't be a fashion that, X and X, I know that my, friend or my aunt or someone is not eating gluten, so I should do it as well to lose weight, things like that. So that's very important to differentiate it. We shouldn't get into this whole issue about going on a gluten-free diet if you don't have a problem with gluten, just because it's fashionable to do it. So be careful of that. On the other hand, the question you're posing, I would say more for gluten, I think it's probably also leading to things such as obesity. If you have a lot of fast food, if you have a lot of processed and canned food, it has a lot of sugar in it, preservatives, salt, carbohydrate, things which are not good for you. So again, moderation would be good. Again, as you mentioned with COVID, people want to try different things. They get bored sitting at home. So, it's very easy to call Zomato or somebody and just have food delivered and this fast food, you do it once a week or once in 2 weeks, that's fine. You enjoy food. But if you start doing it regularly, then obviously it's a problem.
That's a very important message for the millennials. Thank you, Doc. Is there any definitive treatment that is required for wheat allergy or, celiac disease to be particular?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there is no medication for it, so this is a reaction of an antigen, which is gluten, with your gut. And the way to, treat it is to, remove the antigen so it does not trigger this immune reaction. So unfortunately, if you do have celiac disease, which is from gluten, the treatment is lifelong avoidance of gluten and a gluten-free diet.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for your valuable time and also for answering so many queries of our viewers. We were flooded with queries regarding gastrointestinal problems, which were actually not taken so much into consideration during COVID times, especially because heart and lungs were taking the more important, those were the topics of conversation. So thank you so much for being here. With this, we end our conversation with Dr. Sharma.